Thanks, Lascan, and of course I'd also like to warmly commend our Sinn Féin colleagues for the motion before us, calling for an immediate increase in national minimum wage and the introduction of a living wage of at least €12.30 an hour in 2020, and of course a massive contribution of low-paid workers to the economy, often in precarious and difficult employment. It has to be recognised at last in the adoption of a national living wage. Now, I noticed the Minister in her speech she seemed to denigrate the whole concept of a living wage as a sort of theoretical kind of an estimate. But actually the difference between the living wage and national minimum wage is that the living wage, of course, is based on research. It's based on real research in the real economy and the real suffering that families and expenses that families have to go through. So I think the Minister completely misunderstood the whole basis of this debate. And also, of course, she referred to the tiny 30 cents increase per hour in the national minimum wage and said, of course, this has been accepted by the government. But the reality is, Minister, and I searched for it in the budget speech, there is no reference whatsoever by Minister Pascal Donoghue to the national minimum wage in that 34-page speech. It's completely missing. Even the derisory 30 cents an hour increase, it features absolutely nowhere, and certainly no reference whatsoever to a living wage. And as our colleague Deputy Shortall has said on a number of occasions in the last few days, I mean, where exactly is the poverty proofing of Budget 2020? Even 10 years ago, Minister, you remember you get a few 2 pages, maybe 2.5 pages of a very basic attempt to try and look at the impact of the budget on poverty. It's not there at all in this budget, nowhere in the Minister's speech. And of course, my own submission, myself and independent colleagues, to the Minister for Finance, I called for a €7 minimum increase in all social protection benefits and allowances, which could have been costed, of course, at about €500 million. Social Justice Ireland, I know, asked for a basic €9 a week increase and thought that also was particularly merited, given the daunting challenges of Brexit and of climate change, and the fact that we know there will be huge impacts on the most vulnerable families and the most vulnerable citizens in this country. We know consumer prices, no matter what happens, are going to rise. Yet not alone did you not increase the social welfare budget because of the impact of inflation. We know that this government actually cut the budget or cut the social welfare, social protection budget in this budget 2020. And as the excellent, of course, submission by Social Justice Ireland to that budget points out, of course, 1 in every 6 people in the country, about 16% of us, live with an income below the poverty line. And shockingly, of course, that includes 1 in every 5 children in this country, for a country that's often put per capita GDP, Minister, as the second maybe on the planet behind Luxembourg, or neck and neck with Luxembourg. Aren't they those shameful statistics that we allow that to take place, and particularly for people who are prepared to get up early and go out there and to work on a full or a part-time basis? And of course, Fine Gael and your government partners, Fianna Fáil, you have always refused to raise the necessary revenue to address the reality of poverty for so many Irish households. And even knowing, as I said, the likely negative impacts of Brexit and climate change mitigation on the poorest households, you still took no action to move urgently, as this motion rightly says, to a national living wage of at least €12.30 an hour. And it was interesting to read, of course, in the run into Budget 2020, that we even have economists now like David McWilliams, who made a glaring misjudgment in his advice, of course, to Minister Lenihan in 2008 in relation to the bank guarantee. But even he is saying now, Mr McWilliams is saying, that a wealth tax in this country is essential, given that 1% of the people own 27% of the nation's assets, and 5%, of course, own almost half the nation's assets. So it is time, perhaps, to start thinking in terms of a wealth tax. It's more, it's much more timely, even still, immediately, to start moving on the national living wage, and I commend Sinn Féin for bringing this forward. Thanks, Cavan.